Everybody, warm welcome to this lunch meeting. I'm very happy that you're all here. I guess the numbers will go up slowly during the next couple of minutes. Maybe some people are still getting a sandwich or leaving the meetings just before lunch. I'm very, very happy also that Alexander Klippel is here, our invited speaker, distinguished guest for the lunch meeting today. And I guess that the topic that he will be speaking about is already profiled on the screen: extended realities and the co-production of knowledge. My name is Igor Meyer. I am a professor of playful organizations and learning systems in the Academy of AI, Games and Media at Breda University of Applied Sciences. I'm also 1 day a week professor in playful organizations and learning systems at Tilburg University in the Department of Organization and Management. And I will try to now introduce and moderate this lunch meeting. For those of you who do not know the background of this lunch meeting, this lunch talk is organized as part of the so-called DIGIREAL program, the Digital Realities program. That is an NWO SIA-funded program with the objective to actually help universities of applied sciences to create much stronger and better research groups. And together with Fontes University of Applied Sciences and BUAS and Mind Labs, the innovation ecosystem on human-centered AI in Brabant, we were lucky to have our proposal on digital realities granted a few years ago. We're now 2 years on our way. And one of the activities that we do is that we organize these lunch meetings every first Thursday of the new month. So today we invited Alexander Klippel, who is a professor in Wageningen, to talk about his work on extended realities and the co-production of knowledge. And I assume, Alexander, it will be very much related also to our shared interest on nature, environment, tackling and battling climate change and that sort of transformations. But I leave it up to you to actually explain further on how you see this connection between extended realities and these topics. It's very much a shared interest, so I'm very, very happy that you could find the time to tell about your work. Yeah, I think this is about it. I don't take any more of your time. You have about 30 minutes for your presentation, and then I hope we will have another 25 minutes or so for discussions, and we will end up sharply at 1 o'clock. Yes? Okay. Now, Alexander, fly away.
Excellent. Yes, yeah. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be part of the DIGIREAL efforts. As I'm still somewhat new to the Netherlands, I'm very intrigued by all the different things that already are happening, and very grateful that I have a chance to extend also my network through these efforts. So again, thanks for having me. Welcome everyone. I cannot see anyone, so it's always a little surreal to talk to myself. But I do my best. As Igor mentioned, so we are building up capacity at Wageningen to create a lot of immersive experiences using extended realities to indeed connect sort of the technologies that we have for advanced communication, advanced visualization with core interest at Wageningen, which are rooted in the life sciences and address topics such as climate change, biodiversity loss, the nitrogen problem, and so on and so forth. But what I would like to do today is I would like to, if I manage, start my presentation. just 1 second, I have to reorganize my screen. By inviting you to enjoy the painting Geographer by Johannes Vermeer, because it portrays very nicely an example of how knowledge is created, and it is frequently used, especially in my academic circles, to highlight the importance of having the right tools that help us to both think spatially and then also to gain a real deep understanding of the world. What the painting also does, it highlights also the environment in which we gain these insights. But like most paintings, also Geographer invites a rather diverse set of interpretation. One is that the Geographer is indeed surrounded by maps and other tools, and he has himself immersed himself in his work and in his thoughts in the pursuit of a deep understanding of the world. It is indeed a celebration of discovery and the creation of knowledge that were very prominent topics in the Dutch Golden Age. What you can also do, though, is to look at the painting and see it as a reflection of a rather intellectual endeavor with very little emotion or personal elements. So maybe celebrating the importance of objectivity and reason to study the world, but it does lack a certain emotional connection. Right? So if we envision then the Geographer in the current day and age, so no doubt we would have remedies for this issue. We could indeed help him to connect to the world that he tries to understand through the use of immersive technology. And maybe he would use a device such as Apple's Vision Pro that would allow him to not only cognitively connect to the topic that he tries to understand, but also to immerse himself not in his room, but in the actual world that he tries to understand, to potentially also have an emotional connection. Right? So then instead of looking at the world, trying to understand it from the confines of his room, he could be there, well, with the technology that we have these days, basically anywhere, right? And also, and that's the important part, with anyone. So instead of, again, being separated from the world that he's trying to understand, he can become part of it. He can feel and experience what climate change does to the composition of a forest, what it means to lose biodiversity, witness the melting of polar ice sheets, or you can also reverse it and really look into how nature-based solutions could offer us a potential way out of the current challenges and make sure that the children we have are not the last generation. And again, so he cannot do this only by himself, but because it is an accessible space, he could invite anyone into that space and share not just his knowledge, but to also invite people to share their perspectives and their knowledge. The reason why I think that extended realities and the immersive technologies that allow us to create extended realities are such a powerful tool in our arsenal of tools that we have to communicate is that there's mounting evidence that they are creating experiences that are indeed real, that are comparable to the real world. There's this nice story that was circulated on Twitter a while back, where a farmer posted these images of his cows on Twitter, indicating that while the cows during the winter periods did not have access to green meadows, it was indeed the case that the cows, if experiencing a virtual version of a green meadow, would indeed produce more milk. So ethically, there's a lot of question marks that you can have about this approach. So But the point is that this is a nice example that really shows the mounting evidence that we now have that shows and demonstrates how immersive virtual experiences actually have implications on all aspects in the real world, whether this is from transferring knowledge, from reducing the need for pain medication to mitigate pain, or then in this anecdotal example to have cows produce more milk if they think that they are on a green meadow. This is achieved through the quite paradigmatically different nature of immersive experiences. So because it is indeed the first medium that we have that allows us to bridge the gap between the digital content that we create and ourselves. So for the time being, we were always separated from digital representations. We looked at screens, we looked at tablets, phones, and so on and so forth. But now we essentially can step into the representation, become part of the representation with all the senses and our bodily agency that is so important for creating experiences that allow us to understand things. I've another anecdotal aspect, so that I cannot verify. So maybe Igor can help me out. So this is the supposedly the Chinese symbol for presence. Right? So, and if you think about any good conversation, it really starts with being present. And the important thing is that present, again, if you think back to the geographer, is not just something that is an intellectual endeavor, but it is really a multi-sensory experience that involves certainly visual senses, but it also might involve auditory senses. It certainly requires our undivided attention, and it also has this emotional aspect to it, so that we really are able to connect with the topics that we are actually trying to understand. So, and then again, seeing sort of just taking one step back, so experience, for example, through extended realities are really something that allow us to understand the context in which we are placing a certain problem and trying to find a solution. It can create empathy. There's other evidence that shows that being in the body of a cow might reduce the consumption of meat afterwards. It fosters cultural humility and cultural sensitivity by being able to take someone else's perspective in a very, very real and fundamental way. It allows us to build trust in the data, for example, that we are trying to understand, because it is a way of also creating validity for certain models, because we can experience whether or not they are actually making sense. One wonderful thing is that we can actually learn from our mistakes, right? So in sort of experience something, failing at something, and then retrying something is something that we can do in a safe way in immersive experiences. And then related to what I said before, it not just communicate or involves communication in sort of the traditional textual or verbal aspects, but it involves all aspects of communication. And this can go on and on. And if you take all this then together, so as sort of a way to really engage people in sort of jointly finding solutions. So my hypothesis and proposition is that XR is indeed one of the most powerful tools to enable the co-production of knowledge. And just briefly, so co-production or co-creation of knowledge is really sort of this idea of collaboratively approaching the generation and the application of knowledge. So where not just experts talk to non-experts, but where they really engage in meaningful conversations, often with very, very different backgrounds and perspectives, and work together as equal partners to create, share, and then apply this knowledge. So very much a divergence from this traditional top-down, expert-driven models of knowledge, by emphasizing the active participation and the contribution of the various stakeholders. And to make sure that this communication and this process works, XR is one of the tools that we can use to make sure that indeed everyone is on the same page, grounds communication in experiences, and then constructively and productively can move forward. I have a couple of examples from recent projects that we had that allows us to do this or to realize this approach. One is a project that I still sort of carried with me when I came to the Netherlands. It was a project on visualizing forest futures, and you could, in essence, say it's like we created a very complex digital twin of forest to simulate what forest in the future could look like, and then really made it accessible. The nice thing here was that it's a project that was inspired and involved the Menominee Nation, which is a Native American tribe in Wisconsin. They're very well known for their sustainable approach to forestry. So in order to then first collect data and get data for what forests look like, we did indeed rely on the tools, the really sophisticated tools that we have available. In this case, it was an ecological modeling environment called Landis2. It's a very powerful tool that allows for looking into species composition, the composition of soils, the climate, and having different climate change predictions, but then also carbon nitrogen extensions, as well as various disturbances in forms of insects, harvest, fire, or wind. So it's an extremely powerful tool. And as I said, in current terms, you might call it a digital twin of a forest that allows for simulating the number of different processes within the forest. The challenge is that as powerful as the tool is, the output of this tool is very abstract. So for an area unit, you basically get the species and the biomass per species. So you don't get trees or anything else. So you can marvelously see the changes in biomass over time, but you have no idea what this means in terms of what a forest may or may not look like. So for this information, we would need to access to additional information such as the height of the trees, the number of trees, crown widths, and so on and so forth. There are fantastic efforts underway that have this information. So in the US, it was the FIA Forest Inventory Analysis Database, which we use, but these efforts are really very, very omnipresent now. So in Wageningen, so everyone who's doing remote sensing so has seen the really marvelous approaches and advances that we are making in sort of understanding the current status of the forest. And with this information that we collect about the current state of the forest, we can actually deduct the information and connect the information that we need. So like species, age, biomass, height, crown width, number of trees, to this abstract information biomass. So we did this in a sort of regression modeling approach, and then basically came up with a translation from the biomass into actual trees. And I can show you what this looked like. So this was a 2-hectare area that we used as a pilot study. You can zoom in and you actually can then visualize an actual forest environment. The important thing here is, and I let the video, I have a little video, it's a little old, so I let the video run. So the important thing here is, and this is sort of this aspect of building trust as well. So everything that we did is data driven. So it is not like our understanding of what a forest might look like, but it is a translation of data through objective and transparent rules. So we used an approach called procedural modeling into something that can then be experienced. trees of the futures don't have watermarks. So that's just because we are cheap and use the educational version of the tools and not the $3,000 paid version. So, and this is then something that also allows us to actually think about these environments as really source of information, because it's digital. So we know everything. We know what every tree is. So you've seen the information there. And then we can also model different scenarios. So for example, what happens with or without climate change, or with different climate change models, and then really look into how this affects the composition of trees, both at the ground, but then also at the landscape level. So it is a really, really powerful approach. We had a different project, actually a recent one, together with the TU Eindhoven and the Wonder Lab, which is the visualization unit at Wageningen. And in this case, so, and this is also to just show different approaches, it was an interactive approach that increased the agency that people have to actually design or co-design the spaces that they would like to live in. So it's called cohesive co-designing healthy public spaces via immersive virtual environments. And in this project, so we used the Future Station Plaza in Eindhoven. We had participants with several workshops, and they had the opportunities to actually make the choices themselves and then experience the effects of the choices in VR. So, and this was a really fascinating experience, again, sort of in the really nice sense of the co-design and co-production of knowledge, to see how going through these experiences really changed the dynamic of the follow-up discussions that we also had with several municipalities. So, and this is, again, it is something where people could refer to an actual experience rather than sort of relying on numbers or having to just verbally describe what they were actually experience. One of the things that is important, again, to then think about how we can realize such an approach at scale. So this is one of the challenges that immersive technologies and immersive experiences still face, is that for the Netherlands, we actually looked into an approach where we are in a position to create, again, based on the information we find in various databases, a foundation for an basically open source and embodied digital twin applications. And I just show a quick example here. So we are advancing, again, together with Wonder, for various projects that we have, whether this is for flooding or for contextualizing nitrogen pollution, an efficient approach to visualize the data that we have in the context of an immersive experience. So for, I mean, most of you know this probably much better than me, because I'm in the Netherlands only for 2 years. So there's fantastic databases out there in form of the PDOC, in form of the Bomen register. There's a very detailed digital elevation model. So, and then efficiently being able to integrate this data and these databases into an environment that helps us and allows us to contextualize the data that we are trying to understand is something that is actually becoming very realistically possible within the very near future. And then, because I know, going to Breda, I should always also talk a little bit about sort of serious games, so and the approach that we can have for serious gaming. And we realized an approach here that was tailored to facilitating system thinking. And I think this is, again, thinking about what we try actually to do also with digital twin efforts, is to, in essence, understand very, very complex systems in a more meaningful way. And I think it is really important to think about how, not just as scientists, but for really a broad public, this can be achieved in the most meaningful ways. And I think that if you combine the opportunities that we have now for creating immersive experience, for creating simulations based on digital twin efforts, and then bringing this together in a more playful, more meaningful, more exploratory way, where we potentially, and that's what I said before, can learn from our mistakes. I think we have a really powerful tool in our hands to really bring people on the same page for these kinds of critical decision making that is necessary to move us into the right direction in the future. We did this for the critical zone. So we developed a game, it's called the CZ, or Critical Zone Investigator. In this game, we tackled one of the most complex systems that we have, the critical zone. The critical zone is in essence the outer layer of the planet, from the bedrock to the canopy levels, which supports life. You sometimes also hear the term the food, water, energy nexus. And it's really important to look at this layer in a transdisciplinary way, because as layers indicate, so it has actually many layers. And what happens often is that even scientists sort of focus very, very rigidly on their own layer. So if you're a soil scientist, that's your layer. If you're a geologist, that's your layer. If you're an ecologist, that is your layer. If you're a meteorologist, that is your layer. So, but in order to really understand the processes in such complex systems, and it is really important to think of the system in a much more transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary way. So we approached this challenge through developing a game. As I said, it's what's called CZ Investigator. There's much more elements, but I just show one in terms of the effects on deforestation on the hydrosphere. So we focused mostly on hydrological aspects in the environment. The nice thing is you can also make things visible that are underground. You just saw the wedge coming up. You can simulate processes into the future, such as deforestation, by just pressing a button. And then importantly, sort of combining this with what happens actually if there is deforestation in terms of the changes in the hydrosphere. So in this case here, you switch on the rain, and then you see that so the changes, that there are changes if you compare to switching on the rain with the forest in the way that surface water actually runs off on the slopes of the hill. You can do the same thing with the underground part. So I don't go into detail here by seeing so how sort of water is basically trickling into the underground. So, and that is a really powerful tool. What I'm particularly happy with in this research, because it was not just a sort of designing a game with good intentions, but we also looked into what are the actual effects of this game on aspects such as someone's ability to think in systems, and then also to connect to things that potentially protect systems in form of policies that would facilitate and protect environmental spaces. So, and what we found is, and that was really interesting. So, and I think that everyone who designs learning spaces can probably relate to that. So, you give someone information, and in most cases they learn something, right? So that's a good thing, right? So we all learn. What we did is we looked at it from the perspective of, okay, can we actually design something that allows us to assess whether they are not just learning some facts, but actually really demonstrate that this really enhances their ability to think in systems. So we designed an instrument it's called the ripple effect. So where we had questions that were not related to the critical zone at all, but from a different domain, such as, okay, if you wash your car and you consume a lot of water, so what are the implications there? So it was a different domain. So there was some transfer of knowledge that was required. And then the interesting part here was that everyone learned and improved through going through the experience. We compared it to basically putting the same information on a website. And then what we found is that if you account for and control for past science education, that people with fewer years of science education actually significantly more benefited from the serious game approach compared to the website, both in terms of their ability to think in systems, as well as their willingness to support pro-environmental policies. And I think this is a really important aspect, also in line with the idea of, if we want to create efficient tools for co-producing knowledge, what are actually the environments, the digital learning spaces, the digital decision support environments that we can create that really helps everyone to be on the same page. So, and this already brings me to the end. So I try to keep it short. So what I try to at least demonstrate with a couple of examples is that we are indeed in the position to facilitate the co-production and the co-creation of knowledge through technologies such as extended realities. And it's important because the way that the communication happens is grounded in experiences and shared experiences. And I think this is a particularly powerful approach to make sure that the ideas, the very ideas of co-production of knowledge, moving away from the top-down approach to really creating a more contextualized, empathetic, and holistic approach to solve problems is facilitated. And that's something that I'm particularly very excited about, because the technology itself has advanced to such a degree that it becomes possible to have it in a place like Wageningen, right? So where the main focus is on life science and not on creative technologies. And we can actually really use it as a tool in our toolbox, a very powerful tool in our toolbox, to really address some of the challenges that we are facing. That it often is the case that the solution to the problems are challenged and hampered by not being able to communicate why we are doing certain things in an efficient way. So, and with that, I thank you all for attending. And needless to say, so I had an abundance of very, very excellent collaborators, students, postdocs, colleagues who made all these wonderful projects possible. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alexander. That was wonderful, very insightful. And actually, I think every time we talk, or you give a presentation or I give a presentation, I'm always a bit amazed on how much complementarity and a little bit of overlap there is. Yeah, that gives us 25 minutes for a discussion. And I would just like to start with opening the floor and see if anybody wants to ask the first question. And please just raise your hand. And if no hands are raised and you feel that there is an opportunity to jump in, then just raise your question. Anybody? I see Mark. Mark, yes. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for your presentation, Alexander. It's really interesting, and I think it also really addresses difficult things like how can we realize what climate change is bringing along. I'm puzzled still. How can we use this? Because how do you prevent that you are the evangelist that convinces people that climate change is real, we have to change. How can you make this support a real open debate in society? Do you have any experience with that?
In society, so that's not yet.
Okay.
So this is, I mean, this is one of the things that I really like about the Netherlands, that a lot of the challenges that we are facing are much more contextualized, and I think this is one of the things that I think is a wonderful direction, right? So if you look at the various NVO projects and programs that exist, a lot of them are really rooted into, okay, what is a meaningful way of communicating and addressing real challenges rather than sort of providing the theoretical foundations. I do believe that the theoretical foundations are important, and that's what my focus was largely before. So understanding that something in general works, I think, is an important starting point. And with the availability of the technology now, and the accessibility, I think it would be indeed fantastic to really look into opportunities to scale this part up. I didn't go through all of the projects, but there's one project with one of my colleagues, Jakob Wallinger, that we have developed, which is focusing on Dutch landscapes, particularly focusing on sandy soils, where we have developed this into a collaborative approach. So not from a data-driven perspective, but really from an knowledge-based perspective. Okay, there's a landscape, and the landscape could evolve into a energy landscape. It could evolve into a rewilding landscape, or it could evolve into a more agricultural food landscape. So, and this is currently an ongoing project, which hopefully provides some insight to your question. So how this could then also be used in a societal sort of framework with stakeholders from different parts to really discuss potential solutions.
Okay. I'm not sure if I interpret this right, but do you also imply with this that we can also work with more qualitative models that visualize relations between choices and outcomes? So
oh yes, yeah. So sorry. This, yeah. So as I said, I try to keep it short, but so I think there is beauty and need for being able to visualize scientific data in an open, transparent, and reproducible way, right? So that's as a scientist in me, I think this is great, right? But there is likewise, there is also the opportunity to indeed use it in a much more qualitative way. And we have actually two projects. One is with Australians, so the CSIRO, where you have sort of reference landscapes. And you design the landscape based on experts' knowledge, or as you have seen in the Cohesive app, it's actually not experts, it's basically the people who potentially live in this environment who can create designs. And then the Castor one, again, it's kind of a mixture between sort of a scientific approach, sort of societal needs, and then having this experience, and then really using it, having the immersive experience and using it as a communication starter, right? So, and yeah, it does not have to be quantitative, or it can really also be qualitative in the sense that this is my perspective, and you have a rationale potentially for why, and then use this also to help other people understand where you're coming from, right? So I think that is the powerful opportunity that is emerging, and that, but I fully agree with you, has not been used in a sufficiently large scale level, so where we could really bring together people in a very closely societally relevant way.
Alexander, there is another question raised by Italo Souza de Sena, who unfortunately cannot use his microphone today. But the question, I will read it. I would like to hear more about the challenges related to accessibility when using XR technologies. How can we scale these applications to effectively communicate these topics with citizens?
Yeah, so there's, I would say there's two aspects to this, right? So one is related to creating the content. And this is what, so I showed with the little tool, this landscape generator, right? So where you use existing databases and you can fill the databases with data from the present, the past, the future, and then basically have a more or less automatic pipeline to create immersive experiences from them. These kinds of efforts will also be accessible in the more qualitative way. So if you think about generative AI approaches to content generation, so this is something that is quite exciting at the moment because you can also think about it in what we discussed with Mark just now. So the more my perspective on things. So this is one aspect, and the other aspect is indeed the technology itself. Just if you look at the developments in the last 8+ years, it's really remarkable, right? So you can, so 8 years ago, so 2014, you needed to invest $500,000 or euros, sorry. So euros, but technology is more expensive, 750K. To set up a lab that does anything immersive, right? So, and this is now something that has really started to enter mainstream. The disadvantage of AI in this case is that, so a year ago, everyone was talking about the metaverse, right? So, and now everyone talks about AI. That's just a little bit the nature of main developments. But the developments are still ongoing. And if you look into the technology, how accessible it is, so that for indeed 400 euros, you can get a headset that is quite an amazing piece of technology. It is something that will become accessible within the next couple of years because we see the developments in both the content creation, which needs to be, and this is why we do this as open source, for example. I really believe that there needs to be more efforts to do this as an open source rather than leaving it to companies, right? So, and that's important, as well as the technology itself that we can use to then access the experiences.
Okay, thank you. I hope that Italo is satisfied with your answer. But anyway, we will hear in the chat. Is there any other questions from the audience? Okay, then, oh yeah, I see Harman. Go ahead, just jump in. Harman?
You're muted.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there you are.
I was wondering what are the practical costs of building an environment like this? Because if you want to use this in like public decision making and you have to build it for every case, another set, then it will become less practical to use it in the decision making. But if it's cheap and consistent, maybe it's practical in its use. So what are the numbers we have to think of at the moment?
Yes. Yeah. So the goal is to really make it accessible, right? So, and the tool that I just showcased is really a tool that, and we actually got the best short paper award for it. So it's a tool that allows you to indicate XY coordinate in the Netherlands, and then it's basically populated automatically. So, and that's the future that I see. There are, of course, shortcomings at the moment in terms of, for example, the visual fidelity of, for example, buildings. So in the example that you've seen, so most of the buildings are a little monotonous. So that does not mean that the data does not exist to properly provide, for example, facade information in these experiences. Because there are, and this is then the quote problem, there are companies such as Cyclomedia, for example, who drive through essentially the entire Netherlands twice a year and collecting images. So the information is there. It's really awesome. It's just really a matter of saying like, okay, we need to make this information publicly accessible. And this is really one thing that I firmly believe in. You can, of course, pay an awful lot of money to a private company to create something like this. But in order to also democratize these opportunities for citizen engagement in this particular way, you really need to focus on open source development so that it actually is achievable at a reasonable cost. So, and again, so the tool in the basic version, so for just sort of the experience itself, actually works for the Netherlands, because the Netherlands is there's an abundance of data available, so which is awesome. So I was really quite happy to see that, including, for example, database like the Bomenregister, where almost every individual tree is actually digitally recorded, right? So so the information is there, and my hope is that within the next 1 to 2 years, it really becomes something that is tremendously more accessible and then can also be used in these decision-making contents. At the moment, yeah, concrete cost is a little bit hard to estimate. There's definitely a lot of labor involved in that. But so just to give you one figure, so for the project we created for Eindhoven, the cohesive one, so it's a pilot, excuse me, it's a pilot project through this EWUU network. And the cost that we had allocated for the development was 5,000 euros, right? So that's, in the scheme of things, it's extremely affordable. But of course, you don't have like this super polished Foster & Co. star architect environments, right? So you have a much more basic version of it. But it can be done at a very reasonable price.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Oh, maybe I can go a little bit into a critical debate, Alexander.
Yes.
You know, I think both of us, we sometimes get the question, and I often, and I hate that question, so I'm going to ask it to you anyway. You know, like we have all these games and immersive environments, and we believe that it will create system thinking and social learning and so on. But actually, who is in these games and these things? So who are the willing recipients of these things, and are these the people that are actually solving our big problems? So in terms of scope, who are we reaching, and are we reaching the right target audience? And yeah, maybe that's the underlying question. So we go out there and we think like, if people understand the system and if they learn from each other and they learn system thinking and whatever, then we've done some good, and it will lead to better decision making. But is that the case, and under which conditions, and what can we do and actually to help that transfer?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, excellent question. So, and I think that it would be awesome to get together and really think about this and maybe write a proposal. So because I think so that there's a couple of ingredients, and I think that's important to understand as well. So there's what we tried with the more basic research oriented approach for this critical zone investigator, right? So I think it's important to find really some sort of scientifically sound evidence that it actually works, right? So I think that's really important to see, not just saying like, hey, look at all these immersive applications that I can build. So isn't that wonderful? And yes, and for some aspect, it is perfectly fine to just use that aspect and say like, great. But to really understand that it also actually works and that it does indeed have the potential to facilitate system thinking, there is some basic research necessary. So there's no question about that. I think that what also, and this happens in discussions, so sometimes even just calling something a game or even a serious game kind of puts some people off still, right? So it is not completely anchored in our understanding how we address really critical problems of societal magnitude. And now it's saying, yeah, I can maybe address this by designing a serious game and people help people understand that. So there's a little bit of sort of that creating a bit more of an understanding there that it is actually a really powerful tool. And then the sort of when you talk about the audience, so I think that we sometimes maybe forget how excited we were when we were younger to actually engage in games, and especially so in computer games. So if you look at Minecraft, right? So it's not like a particularly visually appealing environment, but it's amazing how kids, my kids included, so love and embrace these opportunities through games. And I think that so if we think about this a bit more and open up ourselves, then I think it is possible. But it is, as you said, it's not an easy task to really convince people that this is something that potentially leads to more insights and better decisions. The one aspect that I'm very curious about, and I don't have an answer, and I don't think that anyone has an answer at this point, because what happened, or what is, I think, the status quo is that one of the things that are really missing is more longitudinal studies that also indicate that providing someone with a certain experience could also lead to something that then changes behaviors, which is one of the key elements in all of our issues that we have, right? So we need tools that are efficiently help us to also change behavior, not just to, I know that I should not snack after 8, so because it's not good for me. It reduces my sleep quality and blah blah. So all these things I know, right? So it's not that the knowledge is there, but to change the behavior at times, that's the key thing. And it could be that this is also true, but I don't think that anyone really has an answer to that yet. So yeah, let's have a meeting and discuss all this and really come up with a roadmap for how we sort of address this in a more systematic way.
Yeah, sometimes I'm a bit concerned that we put all this effort in system thinking and learning and whatever, etc., and then we put the people in games and in all our tools, and they said, "Oh, yeah, I understand now the system better, but I'm going to do it linear anyway."
Yes.
Yeah, now I understand how economy, ecology, and whatever, and how important it is to protect the ecological system or whatever. But yeah, unfortunately, the economic system has preference. Yeah. So, and I know that maybe it's not up to the tools and the instruments we have to solve that, but sometimes I just wonder a little bit that we shouldn't also go back to the value orientations that are in our presumptions in doing this, and then also touching upon these value systems, that we are using them under the right conditions for the right value systems.
Yeah, but Igor, don't you raise the bar too high in your
that might
want
be.
to achieve? Because I don't think we need everybody to understand the system, but awareness of possible scenario outcomes is already a very big goal. I think that people understand that certain choices in policy, in whatever, lead to certain outcomes.
Yeah.
I think that already helps a lot.
I understand that line of reasoning, but sometimes maybe because I get a little bit, I also fear a little bit from my own work that I have these amazing experiences, but the underlying value system, so almost like the structures behind it, do not automatically lead to the translation of that insight into the right decisions. And I know that you can easily say, yeah, that's not our to blame. We did our best. We can't achieve that. But shouldn't we be a little bit more critical on the relationship between using these and in which structures we use them?
Yeah, but that's actually a really good point. So I think I can see both things, right? So I think there's the big goals, but then I think if you look at it really, the baby steps, right? So when we had, for example, the workshops with the Cohesive app, it was really nice to see how the communication between the participants actually changed, right? So if you talk about designing future urban landscapes and urban spaces, and not just talking about it from the perspective, we need more green for heat islands, and so to mitigate heat islands, on all kinds of those more sort of factual driven aspects, but really seeing like, oh yeah, I really liked seeing this fountain there, and so the communication really shifted towards talking about what they experienced rather than sort of the factual aspects. And I think that is something we can do. Whether this then leads to something that is also individually leading to behavior change, again, that's long-term research projects. But I think that even with the tools that we have, focusing on some of the positives, whether this is what Mark said, the understanding of certain scenarios and outcomes, or being able to communicate with each other in a more meaningful way, I think those things we can achieve, and then maybe work towards the even bigger goals. But it's a really good and really useful discussion to have.
I don't think it's you should look at it as a single solution. It's
no. So
it's an element of an environment where you can use these options to learn or experience something. So let's have a broader view than just what this tool can do. But
no. So
it fits in the context.
Yeah, no, I apologize. So if I given the impression that I think I have the solution to everything, so this was not my intention. So
it's a little bit encapsulated in the questions Igor asks. It's like
I understand, and I really appreciate that, Harman. But then also that question in how do these tools actually relate to the other structures and other tools and the broader context in order to create that impact is a very interesting question. And I sometimes wonder whether we know enough about it. So we're sometimes a bit fascinated by the tools, and then we limit the system and say, yeah, but we create this thing. You should look at it in the context.
But in education context, you see all these simulations of like farming machines or something, where you can practice before you get to use the actual machine in real life. That's a direct relation between the model and the environment. So, and if that doesn't line up, you learn the wrong things. So it doesn't have any value. So there's a real uses for these things already, and this is just a little bit more less structured, where you can play along with more of the subparts of the environment that you created. But it's just a step forward, I think. Okay.
Very appreciate. Hey, looking at the time, I promised that we would end sharp at 1 o'clock. The time has arrived. Thank you very much, Alexander, for your wonderful presentation. And I hope you all enjoyed the presentation and the discussion afterwards. And I'm looking forward to continue with Alexander and other people in the audience, and hope to see you at the next DIGIREAL lunch meeting.